gasps filled the glittering hall like breaking glass. Ayesha's hand trembled in the air, her knuckles stinging, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Around her, the chandeliers blazed, reflecting 1,000 shocked faces. Every eye in the Holt mansion was fixed on the maid who had just punched a billionaire. Damien Holt touched his jaw, stunned, disbelief hardening in his steel-blue eyes. For a moment, time froze. Then chaos erupted. "She hit him!" Someone shouted. "Oh my God! Get security!" Another cried. Glasses clinked, heels scraped the marble, whispers spread like wildfire. Ayesha couldn't move. Her pulse raced. Her whole body shook. She hadn't meant to hit him, not really. It had just happened. 1 second, Damien was laughing with his guests, holding his crystal glass. And the next, she saw it. A man in a black suit, his smile too casual, had leaned over the bar and slipped something, a small vial, into Damien's drink. The liquid swirled, disappearing instantly. No one noticed. The orchestra played, people toasted, but Ayesha saw. She froze, tray in hand, breath caught in her throat. Who would believe her? A maid from the slums, covered in cheap perfume and nerves? Her heart screamed, "Do something!" before her mind could catch up. "Sir, don't!" she shouted, rushing forward. The crowd turned as she reached him, his glass already raised. She lunged, panic blinding her, and her fist struck his face with a sharp crack. The glass flew. Shards and golden liquid rained across the marble floor. Damien staggered back, clutching his jaw, his face a mix of pain and outrage. "What the—" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. Ayesha's eyes filled with tears. "Please, sir, don't drink it!" There was poison. Laughter rippled through the guests, sharp and cruel. "Poison? From who?" A woman in a diamond gown mocked. "She's insane," another added. Cameras flashed. Phones lifted. In seconds, her world turned into a headline. 2 guards grabbed her arms roughly. "Outside, now! No, please! I saw someone put something in his drink," she cried, twisting free for a moment, desperate to explain. He was tall, black suit, near the bar. "Enough!" the head guard barked, dragging her toward the door. Damien stood motionless, his reputation bleeding under the stares. His lips tightened as he looked at the trembling girl who had humiliated him in front of the city's richest elite. Ayesha's voice cracked as she begged, "I swear, I was saving your life." "Take her out," Damien said coldly, his voice quiet but final. Her knees buckled as the guards forced her through the double doors. The laughter faded behind her, replaced by the hum of the night air. The mansion's golden glow poured over her like fire, making her small figure seem even smaller. Outside, the gates of Holt Mansion loomed high, black and merciless. She stumbled once before they threw her bag after her and slammed the iron shut. The world felt colder instantly. She pressed her palms to the bars, trembling. Inside, the party resumed, muffled music echoing like a cruel reminder that she didn't belong. Her cheek burned from where a guard had gripped her. Her heart burned worse. Why didn't anyone listen? She whispered to herself. Her mind replayed the moment over and over. The vial, the glass, the strike. Maybe she was crazy. Maybe no one slipped anything at all. But deep inside, something told her she was right. A gust of wind rustled her uniform. She wiped her tears, staring up at the mansion windows where shadows moved behind silk curtains. Somewhere inside, the man she had saved from death was probably nursing his pride, cursing her name. She turned to leave when a voice from behind the gate startled her. A young guest, leaving late, whispered to another, "Did you see his lips before she hit him?" "What about them?" They turned blue. Ayesha froze. Blue. Her heart pounded again, louder this time, not from fear, but from something else. A terrible, trembling certainty. She backed away from the gate, staring up at the mansion's glowing windows as the music inside carried on, oblivious. No one believed her. No one even looked twice. But she knew what she saw, and now she knew she was right. Somewhere behind those golden walls, a billionaire was dying, and the only person who could save him had just been thrown into the dark. Cold metal pressed against her skin as Ayesha sat on the concrete bench, her torn uniform clinging to her damp skin. The faint hum of flickering lights filled the silence of the small police cell. Her knuckles were still raw. Every few seconds, her mind replayed it. The sound of her fist hitting Damien Holt's jaw, the gasps, the flash of blue on his lips before everything fell apart. The cell door clanged open. Two officers stepped inside, one holding a clipboard. "Get up!" the taller one barked. "You ready to tell us the truth now?" "I already did," she whispered, voice shaking. He slammed the clipboard down on the table. "You hit a billionaire in front of cameras. For what? Fame? Money?" Her throat tightened. "I saw someone put something in his drink." The shorter officer laughed. "Sure you did. And I suppose the mystery man vanished into thin air?" "I'm not lying." Her voice cracked. He was tall, black suit, near the bar. Enough! The tall one cut her off. "Admit you wanted attention, and maybe we'll talk about bail." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked down at her bruised wrists, then at the metal table between them. "I was trying to save his life." The officer's tone softened just a fraction. "Then where's your proof?" Silence. Ayesha had nothing. No camera footage, no witness, just her word against the city's richest man's silence. Hours passed. She sat motionless, the walls closing in around her. Somewhere outside she heard laughter, probably, from another officer scrolling through the headlines. Maid. "Assaults billionaire at gala," they read. "Crazy. Servant ruins charity night." Every word felt like a slap. Meanwhile, miles away, the Holt mansion's golden lights had gone dark. Damien had collapsed minutes after the chaos. His bodyguards rushed him to the hospital, where doctors whispered the word poison, but no one connected it to the maid who had tried to warn him. When the cell door finally opened again, the officers looked tired. "You're lucky," one muttered. "Bail's been paid." "Who?" she asked weakly. "Your co-workers. Don't make them regret it." They handed back her bag, empty except for a cracked phone and a small silver cross. She walked out into the night air, dizzy with exhaustion. Outside, 3 maids waited near the police gate. Their eyes were red from crying. "We told them you're not violent," one said, gripping her hand. "We took a collection. Enough to get you out." Ayesha's voice trembled. "Thank you." The oldest one, Salma, sighed. "Go home, child. Don't come back to the mansion. They've replaced you already." Rain began to fall, soft but cold. By the time Ayesha reached her neighborhood, her shoes squished with every step. Her landlord stood outside her door, arms crossed. "You brought shame to this building," he snapped. Reporters came asking questions. "You have till tomorrow to leave." "Please," she begged. "I'll pay extra next month." "No!" His voice was firm. "I don't need trouble." He slammed the door of his own flat. Ayesha sank onto the steps, wrapping her arms around her knees. Her eyes stung, not from rain but from defeat. Everything she had worked for, gone. Her reputation, her job, her home. She stayed there until dawn, her stomach empty, her hope thinner than air. The city began to stir. Horns, vendors, footsteps, but she felt invisible among them. Around noon, a familiar face appeared. A fellow maid from the mansion, Layla, clutching an envelope. "I shouldn't be here," Layla whispered. "They said anyone who helps you will be fired." "Then why risk it?" Ayesha asked softly. "Because you weren't lying," Layla said, glancing around. "Mr. Holt, he was poisoned. They found traces in his blood. He's in the hospital. Ayesha's eyes widened. Then they'll know I was telling the truth? Layla shook her head. They're keeping it quiet. The media doesn't know. But the doctors said, he's in a coma now. The world tilted. Ayesha grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Coma? She repeated, barely breathing the word. Layla nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I thought you should know. When Ayesha finally spoke, her voice was hollow. They'll blame me for this too. Layla didn't deny it. Be careful, Ayesha. They'll destroy anyone who questions them. She left quickly, disappearing into the noise of the street. Ayesha stood there for a long time, the paper envelope clutched in her hand. Inside it, a few crumpled notes and a folded prayer card. Her heart was breaking, but somewhere beneath the grief was something else. A spark, a faint, defiant whisper telling her that the truth wasn't done yet. That night, she curled up on her narrow cot, staring at the cracked ceiling. Outside, rain beat against the window. Sleep came slowly, heavy with exhaustion and fear. In her dream, she saw Damien Holt lying motionless in a white hospital bed. Machines beeped steadily beside him. Then, suddenly, his fingers twitched. His eyes opened, calm but knowing, and his lips moved just enough to whisper, "You were right." Ayesha jolted awake, her heart racing. The room was still dark, but she could feel it. Something was changing. Somewhere out there, the man whose life she tried to save was still fighting to breathe, and she wasn't ready to give up on him. The sound of steady beeping echoed through the white hospital room. Damien Holt's eyelids fluttered open to a blinding light. For a moment, everything was a blur. Shapes, colors, the faint smell of antiseptic. Then came the pain, dull and deep in his temples, and the confusion that felt heavier than his body. "Mr. Holt," a soft voice called. "Can you hear me?" He turned his head weakly. A nurse stood beside him, smiling with relief. "You've been unconscious for 3 weeks. You're safe now. 3 weeks." The words drifted through his foggy mind like smoke. He remembered the party, the flash of cameras, the laughter, the glass in his hand. And then, chaos. A hand striking his face. The sting. The shattering sound. He winced, pressing his fingers to his jaw. "The maid," he muttered. "Where is she?" The nurse frowned slightly. "Maid?" Before she could answer, another voice entered the room, smooth, controlled. "She's gone, Damien." Clara Bennett, his personal assistant, stepped in, wearing her usual poised expression and immaculate suit. Her heels clicked softly on the tile as she set down a stack of papers. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, her voice filled with a practiced concern. "The doctors found traces of a toxin in your blood. They said it wasn't lethal, but enough to make you collapse." Damien's eyes narrowed. "Poison?" She nodded. "Yes, but before you start panicking, the police concluded it wasn't deliberate. Just bad storage of imported wine, maybe. The press already has their version, that you fainted from exhaustion." He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness stopped him. "And the woman?" he asked again. "The one who hit me?" Clara's expression darkened. "A maid named Ayesha. She attacked you in front of everyone. She claimed she was saving you from poison, but it was nonsense. The footage went viral. She's already been fired and blacklisted. Don't worry about her." Damien leaned back, the memory flickering. A blurred figure, brown eyes wide with fear, a trembling hand. Then, nothing. Her face was gone. "She said she was saving me," he whispered. Clara's smile was tight. She wanted attention. "That's all. Let it go." But something inside him refused to settle. The image of blue liquid swirling in his glass haunted the edge of his mind. He stared out the window at the city skyline, glittering beneath gray clouds. "Fine," he said finally. "If I'm alive, I'll rebuild. I don't care what the tabloids say." Clara nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. I'll start arranging interviews. People need to see the strong Damien Holt again." As the door closed behind her, Damien's reflection stared back at him from the dark glass, a man who couldn't even remember the face of the person who might have saved his life. Across the city, Ayesha stood at a job agency desk, clutching a folder of references that no one wanted to touch. "Sorry," the clerk said, without looking up. "You're the girl from the news, right? The one who punched Mr. Holt? We can't risk hiring you. Clients would complain." Her throat burned. "Please, I just need cleaning work. Anything." The woman sighed. "Try the hospitals. They're always short on staff." 2 weeks later, Ayesha found herself pushing a cleaning cart through the long, sterile corridors of St. Catherine's Medical Center. The pay was low, the shifts endless, but it was quiet. No cameras, no stares, no whispers. She moved from room to room, her eyes down, her heart heavy with the weight of her ruined name. Sometimes she'd catch people whispering as she passed, "That's her, the crazy maid." Still, she worked. She had no other choice. One morning, as the sun spilled pale light across the ward, Ayesha balanced a tray of fresh water bottles. The floor gleamed. She turned a corner too quickly and collided with someone. Water splashed across a crisp hospital gown. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, reaching for a towel. "It's fine," a deep voice replied, cold and controlled. She froze. That voice. She looked up. Damien Holt stood before her, pale but tall, his hand steady on the IV pole. The same man whose life she'd tried to save, and whose trust she'd lost forever. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Recognition flickered in his eyes, faint, uncertain, like a spark struggling to survive. "Do I know you?" he asked slowly, her lips parted. "You did," she whispered. His brow furrowed, searching her face for answers he couldn't find. Before he could ask more, Clara's voice sliced through the tension. "Damien! You shouldn't be walking without permission." She rushed forward, glaring at Ayesha as if she were invisible. "What are you doing here?" "Go clean another floor." Ayesha bowed her head and stepped back. "Yes, ma'am." As she turned away, her eyes burned. He didn't remember. Not her name, not her face, not the moment she'd saved him. Damien watched her go, something unsettled stirring in his chest. She looked familiar, he murmured. Clara forced a smile. "Just another maid. Don't let her bother you." But as she guided him back to his room, his gaze lingered on the corner where Ayesha had stood moments before. Later that afternoon, Clara stood outside the doctor's office, overhearing a conversation she didn't want Damien to hear. "The toxin wasn't random," the doctor was saying. "We ran new tests. It was a targeted compound, likely slipped into his drink." Clara's heart pounded. She turned away quickly, her mind racing. In his room, Damien stared out the window again, lost in thought. His fingers brushed his jaw where the bruise had once been. A flash of memory, her voice trembling but fierce. "I was saving your life." Before he could piece it together, the nurse burst in, breathless. "Sir, we have the final test results." He turned. "What is it?" "The toxin wasn't random," she said. "Someone tried to kill you." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Damien's gaze shifted slowly toward the door. The same door the maid had disappeared through hours earlier. The faint image of her brown eyes flickered in his mind again, refusing to fade. The city buzzed with whispers. Billionaire Damien Holt was alive, but barely out of the odd. Hospital, and already the rumor. Mill spun faster than the trading floor of Holt. Industries. Someone inside the mansion tried to kill him, one headline screamed. "Poison plot at charity gala," another whispered. In penthouses and boardrooms, everyone had a theory. But inside Damien's estate, the loudest voice belonged to Clara Bennett. "Don't you see?" she said smoothly, pouring coffee for him as morning sunlight poured through the glass walls of his recovery suite. It was the maid, Ayesha. She probably wanted fame or money. Maybe she tried to poison you and failed. When things went wrong, she punched you to cover it up. Damien, still pale from his recent coma, frowned. You think she poisoned me, then saved me in front of everyone? Desperation makes people do strange things, Clara replied. Look at the timing. She disappeared right after the incident. I can arrange a meeting if you want to confront her. Closure, Damien. You deserve it, he hesitated. Her reasoning made sense on the surface, but something about that night gnawed at him. The look in that maid's eyes, the panic that didn't seem fake. Finally, he said, Fine. Bring her to me. The meeting was arranged in one of the mansion's smaller lounges, far from the glittering halls of his charity parties. The air smelled faintly of polish and unease. Ayesha stood by the door in a simple dress, her uniform long gone. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. When Damien entered, her breath caught. He looked different, thinner, quieter, but still commanding. You wanted to see me, sir? She said softly. He motioned for her to sit, but she didn't. You hit me, he began, tone cold but measured, in front of hundreds of people. Why? Her throat tightened. Because you were about to die. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. Explain. There was a man at the bar, she said quickly. I saw him pour something into your glass. I wanted to warn you, but no one listens to a maid. So I ran to stop you before you drank it. You didn't see the vial, but I did. Her voice trembled, but her gaze held steady. That's the truth. For a long moment, Damien said nothing. The ticking clock on the wall filled the silence. Then, with quiet skepticism, he asked, And where is this mysterious man now? I don't know, but he wore a dark suit. He had a scar near his ear. I'd recognize him anywhere. Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. Convenient. Ayesha's shoulders sank. You don't believe me. I don't know what to believe, he admitted. But I do know you've ruined my reputation. The press turned me into a joke because of that punch. Her chin lifted. Then I'm sorry for that. But I'd do it again if it meant saving your life. Her words hung in the air, raw and simple. No drama, no plea, just truth. For the first time, Damien found himself searching her eyes instead of her record. Something about the sincerity there unsettled him. A sudden clatter broke the moment. A waiter outside the door dropped a tray. Startled, Ayesha turned. The tray teetered, and before Damien could react, she darted forward, catching it just before it hit the floor. Not a drop spilled. The waiter stammered an apology, but Damien was watching her. The reflex was pure instinct, not performance. When she straightened, her cheeks flushed. Sorry, habit, he smiled faintly. You're quick. It comes from cleaning up after other people's messes, she said, before realizing the words could sound bold. But instead of anger, he only looked thoughtful. Clara said you vanished after the gala, he said slowly. Where have you been? Trying to survive, she replied simply. No one will hire me. I clean hospital floors now. Something in Damien's chest twisted. He didn't fully trust her, but guilt flickered in the corners of his mind. Fine, he said, standing. You'll work here again, as a live-in cleaner, under supervision. Her eyes widened. You want me to come back here? He nodded. I want the truth, and I want it close. If you're lying, I'll find out. If you're not, he paused. Then I owe you. Ayesha hesitated, then nodded. I'll do it. As she followed him through the hallways she once scrubbed, old memories flooded back. Laughter from rich guests, the smell of polished marble, the sting of humiliation. But now she walked with her head higher, even if fear still trembled beneath her ribs. Clara watched from the upper landing, her expression tightening. She hadn't expected Damien to bring the maid back. When he passed her, he said evenly, Have her room prepared. Clara forced a smile. Of course, but the moment he was gone, her nails dug into her palm. "You stupid girl," she whispered under her breath. "You don't know what you've walked into." That night, the mansion slept under a velvet sky. Crickets hummed outside. In the security room, red lights blinked across a wall of screens. Newly installed cameras covering every corridor. Damien's idea, a precaution after the poisoning. Near midnight, one feed flickered. A shadow moved across the hallway, leading to Damien's private study. The figure paused, glancing both ways. Then it slipped inside. The camera caught a brief, chilling detail: a man in a dark suit, the faint glint of a scar near his ear. The same man Ayesha had described. Ayesha's hand trembled as she pointed at the screen. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man who poisoned your drink." Damien leaned closer to the grainy security footage. The intruder's face came into focus. Sharp jawline, neatly styled hair, a scar etched near his ear. But Ayesha's voice shook for another reason. She knew that face. "Who is he?" Damien asked. She swallowed hard. "Clara's boyfriend. I've seen him pick her up from the mansion. More than once." The air turned cold. Damien's jaw tightened. "Are you sure?" "I'd stake my life on it." Within an hour, Clara was standing in his office, her arms crossed, but her eyes glistening with feigned hurt. "You think my boyfriend tried to kill you?" she asked softly. "Damien, that's absurd." He motioned to the monitor. "Then explain this." Clara leaned in, pretending to watch, her face twisting in practiced disbelief. "That's not Ethan," she said, shaking her head. "He's taller, broader. This could be anyone. The footage isn't even clear. She's manipulating you." "She didn't touch the footage," Damien said. But Clara's tone softened, dripping with sympathy. "Damien, she punched you. She humiliated you in front of everyone. Maybe she's trying to rewrite the story. Make herself the hero who saved you." A hesitant silence filled the room. "You really think she'd go that far?" Damien asked quietly. Clara sighed, lowering her gaze. "Some people crave attention. You've been too kind already." When she left, she brushed past Ayesha in the hall, her expression cool and victorious. "Be careful," Clara murmured. "Sometimes the truth can get you hurt." Tension thickened in the mansion like unseen smoke. The staff whispered behind closed doors. Damien grew distant, avoiding Ayesha's gaze. She worked quietly, watching shadows move in every reflection of the marble floor. One afternoon, while taking out the trash near the back garden, something caught her eye, a glint of glass among discarded paper and wine bottles. She reached in and froze. A small, broken vial, the same kind she'd seen at the party. Inside, faint traces of residue clung to the rim, a crystalline powder with a chemical smell that made her stomach turn. She carefully wrapped it in cloth and tucked it into her pocket. It wasn't proof yet, but it was something. That night, she waited outside Damien's office, determined to tell him everything. But Clara got there first. The sound of her voice filtered through the half-open door. "She's unstable, Damien. The guard said she's been snooping through the trash, muttering about conspiracies. What if she hurts someone?" Ayesha's heart pounded. She stepped forward, ready to defend herself. But Clara's tone shifted suddenly, fragile and trembling. "I'm scared," she said softly. "She's obsessed with you." The words hit Damien harder than she expected. "Obsessed?" he repeated, frowning. "She watches you constantly," Clara whispered. "She keeps asking questions about your schedule. I think she's delusional. Maybe she believes she's your savior or something." Ayesha froze. The broken vial burned against her chest, like a secret that could explode. When Clara left the office, her smirk barely hid beneath her tears. She brushed past Ayesha again. "He's waiting for you," she said sweetly. Inside, Damien stood with his back turned to her, shoulders rigid. "You wanted to talk?" he said without turning. "Yes, sir." Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. "I found this. She stepped forward, holding the cloth-wrapped glass. The vial, the same one I saw that night. He turned at last, his eyes cold. "Stop it! Please, just listen! I said stop!" His voice cracked like thunder. "You've been digging through garbage? Sneaking around my house? Clara told me everything. You need help, Ayesha. You've taken this too far." Her throat tightened. "I'm not lying." "Enough." He grabbed the cloth, glancing at the broken glass, then tossed it on his desk. "Get your things and leave. You're fired." For a second, neither moved. The silence roared louder than any accusation. Then Ayesha's eyes welled. "I risked everything for you," she whispered. "I lost my job, my home, my name, because I believed you deserved to live." Damien looked away. "Leave before I call security." Her hands trembled as she turned toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. "One day," she said softly, "you'll see who's really lying to you." The door closed behind her with a hollow thud. Outside, rain had begun to fall, sharp, cold, and relentless. Ayesha walked through it without an umbrella, the mansion's golden lights fading behind her. Her tears mixed with the storm. Inside, Clara lingered in the corridor, watching Ayesha's figure vanish beyond the gates. She took out her phone and dialed. "It's done," she whispered. "He'll never trust her again." The voice on the other end chuckled low and cold. "Good. Then we move to the next phase." Clara glanced toward Damien's office door, her lips curling into a quiet smile. "Poor thing still thinks he's safe." The line clicked dead. And outside, lightning split the sky, as if warning that the poison in the party wasn't finished spreading yet. Thunder rolled across the city, shaking the thin walls of Ayesha's tiny apartment. Rain battered the single cracked window as she folded her worn uniform into a small bag. Her eyes were red, her spirit hollow. She had nowhere to go, no one left to believe her. Then the voice from the old radio froze her, mid-motion. "Breaking news tonight. Police have officially reopened the Damien Holt poisoning case after new forensic. Inconsistencies were found." Ayesha's head snapped toward the sound. Her heart began to pound. "Reopened," she whispered. "That means they found something." For the first time in days, a spark of hope flickered through the storm inside her. She glanced at the broken vial she'd kept hidden. The real one, not the piece she'd shown Damien. Clara had planted a duplicate. She was sure of it now. She looked out the rain-blurred window toward the glowing skyline and the distant outline of Holt Mansion. "I can't let him die," she murmured. "Not again." She threw on her coat and stepped into the storm. The mansion loomed like a dark fortress, its marble gleaming under flashes of lightning. The guards had thinned out since the scandal, and slipping through the back fence wasn't as hard as she remembered. Every step through the wet grass brought back memories, laughter, cruelty, humiliation, but she pushed them aside. She entered through the side door near the kitchen, careful not to make a sound. The corridors smelled of polish and expensive perfume. Every light felt too bright, every shadow too deep. Her plan was simple. Leave the vial and a note on Damien's desk. Let the police handle the rest, then disappear forever. But as she neared his office, a voice cut through the silence. "Clara, do you realize how close you came to ruining everything?" A man's rough voice answered. "Relax, he still doesn't suspect a thing. You made sure the maid took the fall." Ayesha froze behind the wall. She peeked around the corner. Clara stood near the fireplace, her face lit by the soft glow. Beside her was the man from the footage. The scar, the same sharp jawline. Her stomach turned. Clara hissed. "We should have finished it that night. Now the police are reopening the case. If they find anything—" "They won't," the man cut in. "After tonight, Damien Holt will be a tragic headline." Ayesha's blood ran cold. Clara exhaled sharply. Then do it fast. No more mistakes. She pulled a small metal case from her purse and opened it. Inside, a vial identical to the one Ayesha had found. I'll pour it myself, Clara said. He trusts me. Ayesha's heart pounded in her ears. She crouched lower beneath the staircase, pulling out her old phone and hitting record. Say it again, she whispered, her voice trembling. Through the small crack between the rails, she captured every word. Clara's plan, the name of the toxin, the admission of guilt. But her relief was short-lived. Clara and the man started moving. Upstairs, toward Damien's room. Ayesha's breath hitched. She couldn't just record this. She had to stop it. She crept up the back staircase, every step muffled by the thick carpet. The rain outside masked her movements. From the hall, she saw Clara enter Damien's room, the man waiting near the door. Inside, Damien was asleep, pale against the silk sheets. The stormlight flickered across his face. Clara's voice softened, sweet and deadly. Poor Damien. You never could see who really cared for you. She poured the contents of the vial into the glass of water by his bedside. Ayesha's body moved before her mind could stop it. Stop! The word tore through the silence like thunder. Clara spun around, eyes wide. You? Damien jerked awake, confused. Ayesha? The man lunged toward her, but Ayesha ducked, crashing into the nightstand. The glass tipped, shattering on the floor as water splashed across the carpet. Clara screamed, You ruined everything! She grabbed a heavy lamp, swinging wildly. Ayesha stumbled back, heart hammering, as Damien tried to rise. Disoriented, but realizing the danger. Clara, he rasped. What are you? Shut up! She shouted, her mask slipping entirely now. You were supposed to die that night. Everything was perfect until she got in the way. The man reached for the vial, trying to retrieve it, but Ayesha kicked it under the bed. Damien, call security, she cried. But before he could reach the phone, Clara shoved him back with startling strength. The lamp in her hand came crashing down. Glass, shouts, thunder. Then, darkness. The power flickered. The security camera in the corner blinked twice, and then went black. For a few endless seconds, only the sound of rain filled the night. Somewhere in the dark, a woman screamed. Then a crash, wood splintering, a gasp cut short. The camera's final frame showed a blur of motion, a hand reaching for the fallen glass. Before everything went still. Outside, lightning tore through the sky, illuminating Holt Mansion for a single heartbeat before plunging it back into silence. The steady beeping of a heart monitor broke through the quiet haze. Damien opened his eyes to a ceiling washed in pale light. Antiseptic. Familiar. For a moment he thought it was a dream. Then the sharp sting in his side reminded him he was alive. Again, the door burst open. A doctor rushed in, followed by a detective with a grim expression. Mr. Holt, the detective said, voice firm but respectful. You're safe now. It's over, Damien blinked. Over. The man turned the hospital TV toward him. The news headline burned across the screen. Billionaire saved by the same maid who once struck him. For several seconds, Damien couldn't move. Images flashed. Clara's face twisted in rage, the shattered glass, Ayesha's desperate cry before darkness took him. What happened? He asked finally. The detective set a small recorder on the tray beside his bed. You should hear this. He pressed play. Clara's voice crackled through the speaker, every word dripping venom and guilt. You were supposed to die that night. Everything was perfect until she got in the way. Then the man's voice. Relax. He doesn't suspect a thing. You made sure the maid took the fall. Damien's chest tightened. His jaw clenched as the truth unfolded. The lies, the manipulation, the poison meant for him. When the recording ended, the detective said quietly, Clara Bennett and her accomplice, Ethan Graves, are in custody. They confessed after we played this. Damien's hand trembled slightly. And Ayesha? The detective hesitated. She's stable. Took a few deep cuts when she shielded you from the broken glass. She's in recovery 2 floors down. For a long moment, Damien just stared at the floor. He remembered her trembling hands, the fear in her eyes when she'd said, "I was saving your life." He'd thrown her out. He'd called her obsessed. Now she was the reason he was still breathing. "Can I see her?" he asked softly. Ayesha lay in a quiet hospital room, her arm wrapped in bandages. The steady drip of the IV was the only sound. When the door opened, she looked up and froze. Damien stood there, pale but steady, dressed in a patient's robe. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The air was thick with all the words left unsaid. He took a step closer. "You shouldn't have come back to that house," he said gently. Her lips curved in a faint, tired smile. "I didn't come back for you. I came back for the truth." He nodded slowly, guilt darkening his eyes. "And I doubted you. I believed her." Ayesha looked away. "You had reason to. I'm just a maid." "No," he said firmly. "You're the reason I'm alive." Her eyes met his again, shining. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," he replied. "But I owe you an apology, and maybe a chance to start over." A soft laugh escaped her. Half disbelief, half relief. "Start over? After all that?" He smiled faintly. "You hit me in front of the richest people in the city. Then you saved me twice. I think that's as starting over as it gets." Her expression softened, tears threatening but never falling. "You know," she whispered, "I prayed you'd wake up and see the truth. I didn't care if you forgave me. I just wanted you to live." He exhaled slowly. "Then maybe it's time I start living differently." They sat in silence for a moment. 2 people from opposite worlds bound by pain, truth, and something like respect. Damien reached for the small recorder on the bedside table. "This, what you did, it cleared your name. The police said you'll be recognized as a whistleblower. That means protection, compensation." Ayesha shook her head. "I don't want money." "Then what do you want?" She hesitated. "Peace and a job. Maybe somewhere no one knows my name." Damien's gaze lingered on her. Not pity, but admiration. "We'll see about that." A few hours later, as he was wheeled out for discharge, the hospital entrance swarmed with reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones waved. "Mr. Holt, is it true your personal assistant was behind the poisoning? Did the maid really save your life again? Will you be pressing charges?" And then, the question that made him pause mid-step. "Mr. Holt, are you hiring her again?" The crowd went silent, waiting. Damien looked back over his shoulder, through the glass doors of the hospital lobby. Upstairs, in a window overlooking the city, Ayesha stood watching him. Small, fragile, but strong in her own quiet way. He smiled. "Hiring her?" he said at last, turning back to the cameras. "No." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He let the pause hang for just a beat before finishing softly. "I'm partnering with her." The reporters erupted in shouts, but Damien just kept walking. The storm outside clearing into morning light. Inside, Ayesha smiled faintly to herself, the weight of fear finally lifting. And for the first time in years, she felt something stronger than survival. Hope. The iron gates of Holt Mansion swung open, the same gates that once loomed over Ayesha like prison bars. But this time, they didn't make her feel small. The guard smiled and nodded respectfully. "Morning, Ms. Khan," she smiled back, her steps light as she walked up the stone path. No maid's uniform, no tray in her hands, just confidence, a tablet tucked under her arm, and sunlight spilling across the newly renovated gardens. Inside, the mansion buzzed with purpose, Volunteers unpacked boxes of supplies, and banners lined the grand hall. The Ayesha Hope Foundation, empowering the invisible. It had been Damien's idea, though he'd insisted the name wasn't charity, but credit where it was due. When he appeared at the top of the stairs, adjusting his cufflinks, she couldn't help smiling. The man who once hid behind marble walls and mistrust now wore rolled-up sleeves and a simple smile. "Big day," he said, joining her as they looked around at the bustling scene. Ayesha nodded. "Biggest of my life." He tilted his head. "Nervous?" She laughed softly. "A little. I used to be the one mopping this floor." He smiled. "Now you're the one signing paychecks." They walked together through the hall where reporters had once chased headlines of scandal and betrayal. Now it echoed with laughter and hope. Damien paused near a plaque mounted on the wall. Her name gleamed beside his. Ayesha Khan, co-director, the Ayesha Hope Foundation. He looked at her. "You know, when I first suggested this, you said no." "I didn't want to be anyone's symbol," she said quietly. "I just wanted a life I didn't have to apologize for." "And now?" "Now," she said, smiling faintly, "I want others to have the same chance." The opening ceremony passed in a blur of speeches and applause. Cameras flashed, but this time Ayesha didn't flinch. She spoke with calm conviction, her voice steady, her story unfiltered. She talked about the long nights when she cleaned offices that smelled of bleach and loneliness, about how kindness, no matter how small, had the power to undo cruelty. When she stepped off the stage, the audience stood to their feet. Damien's eyes shone with pride that needed no words. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the golden sunset had painted the sky, Ayesha found herself on the balcony, the same one where she had once hidden from humiliation and tears. Now, she leaned against the railing, the city lights glowing below. Footsteps approached behind her. Damien joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Still awake?" he asked. "I'm not sure I can sleep," she admitted. "Feels like I'll wake up and this will all vanish." He handed her a cup. "If it's a dream, it's mine too." They stood in silence for a while, the wind carrying the faint hum of laughter from the staff quarters below. "You risked your life to save a stranger," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. She looked out over the city. "Sometimes strangers are the only ones who care." He turned toward her. "You changed everything, Ayesha. Not just my life, the way I see the world." She smiled softly. "You changed too. You listened." "Maybe," he said with a half-smile, "but you taught me how." A comfortable silence followed, the kind that didn't need to be filled. There was no grand confession, no dramatic music, just 2 people who had survived the worst parts of themselves and somehow found light again. A few days later, the Foundation's first outreach event began in the city's poorest district. Ayesha stood beside a young mother, signing up for aid. The woman clutched her hand and whispered, "You're the maid from the news, aren't you?" Ayesha hesitated, then nodded. The woman smiled through tears. "You give me hope." Ayesha blinked fast, swallowing emotion. "That's all I ever wanted to give." Weeks passed, and the mansion felt different. No longer a fortress of wealth, but a hub of purpose. Ayesha often caught Damien helping workers carry boxes or pouring coffee for volunteers. Sometimes he'd look at her across the hall, that same faint smile tugging at his lips, one that said more than gratitude. They never labeled what grew between them. It wasn't charity. It wasn't debt. It was something quiet, honest, built on respect, and perhaps, someday, something deeper. On the Foundation's 3-month anniversary, Damien unveiled a mural in the garden, a timeline of change. It showed a young maid with a tray, a storm raging behind her, and beside her, a woman standing tall in sunlight, holding open the mansion gate. Ayesha stood in front of it, tears glinting in her eyes. Damien whispered beside her, "Sometimes, the poorest act of courage can change the richest man's heart." She turned to him, smiling through the ache in her chest. "And sometimes," she said softly, "that heart learns to give back." They stood there together, as the evening light bathed the garden, two souls once divided by power, now united by purpose. For Ayesha, the world no longer felt cruel or impossible. She had found her peace, not through revenge or wealth, but through kindness that refused to die. And in that kindness, she had found everything. Sometimes, the poorest act of courage can change the richest man's heart. If this story touched you, share it to remind others. Kindness doesn't need power, just courage.